Jean-Emmanuel Pondy. I'm a professor of international relations and political science at the International Relations Institute of Cameroon, which is based in Yaoundé. I bring you greetings from the academic community from there, and I would like to also say that in my youth, that is to say, last century, I spent quite a few years in the then Zaire. So it means that it's under the presidency of President Mobutu Sese Seko Kunkungwendu Wazabanga at the time. Since then, of course, we've been following very closely what is happening in the DRC. And today I thought it good to ponder and to wonder, to discuss on, in fact, what has happened as far as democratic process is concerned in that country. This evening I will exchange with you, of course, but I will bring the topic in three phases. Number one, why is the DRC an important actor in international relations, not only for Africa, but also in the international arena generally? Why? The second question which I will attempt to ask is, of course, whether we are witnessing a new beginning after the presidential elections. And the third, of course, will be, if yes, why? If not, why not? I will end with what I think is very important, is to put this all in context. That is to say, it brings back reflections on what democracy is all about. What is the impact of democracy? What is the role of democracy? What is the end result of democracy? And what do we mean by democracy? And then secondly, we'll discuss on a very important aspect as far as I'm concerned. Can you change a country without changing its educational system? And to me, it is a central question which today must be confronted by most African countries. It seems to me that the educational system which is ours is certainly problematic and is unlikely to produce the kind of results which we are looking for. It also produces increased immigration. It produces a lot of lack of comfort with who we are and what we want to be. So I will end up my discussion with that. So without any further ado, I would start with, of course, why is it quite legitimate to consider the DRC an important international actor, not only in Africa, but around the world? It's good to know that way back in history, of course, colonization, which is often referred to, started in a very bad manner there. It's a very unique case where a private concession was in fact taken by somebody. In other cases, we didn't have the privatization of the concession. But it's true that the Belgians themselves, the Belgian state, put an end to that by taking that and now directing things by itself. So it's one example already of something which was a bit unique. But more recently, the Belgian Congo was involved in the East-West global competition in a very unusual way, because the bomb which was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had uranium coming from there. So you see that the Western countries looked everywhere, but located that particular place and used that, I think it was called Little Boy. I think that was the name of the bomb, which I think is not a very appropriate when you see what was done. But I think it shows that it was part and willing and indirect actor of a major I think, earthquake that happened then. Also, we should not forget that the Belgian Congo was the scene of the first peacemaking operations of the United Nations in Africa. 1960, 1964. So the question which you ask today, the blue helmets are still in the same country. I think it begs the question of, in fact, what is the balance sheet? And what is, finally, the logic behind these approaches? And I think the best place to ask that question is today, of course, the DRC. Also, in terms of its significance to world affairs, unfortunately, Dag Hammarskjöld, the second United Nations Secretary General, as you know, died while treating the Congo files between, I think it was between Zambia and the Congo, where his plane crashed. So he was, of course, an important victim of that important problem. So if we only take these marks around the world, it shows that the Congo has an importance to all of us as human beings. And there's an image that says that when you take Africa, the place where the trigger, if you had a revolver, where the trigger is located, is precisely in that area of the Congo. So it may be an image, but I think we should take it seriously because of the importance of a place, 84 million inhabitants today, with a GDP per capita of around $478 only, when compared to a huge country like Nigeria with 195 million people, which has a GDP per capita of over 2,000. It means that there is a problem of repartition, a problem of wealth distribution. So I wanted just to give some reasons why I think it's important to really look seriously at that particular country as being a symbolic country for what we want Africa to become, in the good sense, but also, God forbid, if things go wrongly, I think that the Congo has always been at the forefront of African preoccupations and African action. Now, concerning the 2019 democratic process in the DRC today, I think it's good to know that presidential elections took place at long last after 2 years of I would say procrastination or delays and all kinds of reasons to not to hold them, but finally they were held. And at the end of the session, the results were given. The results were, as we all know, I think, as such. Félix Antoine Tshisekedi, 38.5%. Martin Fayulu, 34.8%. And then Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari, 23.8%. Of course, these gave rise to very differing interpretations, which were also a reason for preoccupation. Okay, but what can be said right from the start is that what happened in the Congo has historical significance, because since June 30th, 1960, which is the day of independence of Congo, I think that that country, unfortunately for us Africans, has witnessed a very traumatic entry into independence. And I think that we must be very much aware of the trauma that independence has caused in terms of the subsequent events, We had secessions here and there in Katanga. We had a lot of traumatic events. And I think more than anywhere in the sub-Saharan Africa of the 1960s and 1970s, the Congo was really an illustration of the many problems that can be accumulated in one country. And that is why when today we are seeing a peaceful transition at the presidential level, I think that it is absolutely important. We cannot belittle it, or we cannot say that it is something which is marginal. In fact, as you know, there were the first transition in November 1965 occurred between Mr. Kasavubu and Colonel Joseph Désiré Mobutu after a coup, of course, 24th of November 1965. And then the second one occurred in July 1997 when President Mobutu was ousted from power. So, and after that, we had an assassination in January 2001 when President Kabila, father, was killed and replaced by the son in 2001. So these are three traumatic events which are not constitutionally recognized by any law, any legal process, certainly not by the OAU nor by the AU. So that's why what has happened is of significance. It can be appreciated in many ways, but it cannot be denied that it is a trend which is a good signal, at least for most of African countries. Now, having said that, of course, the question becomes, is this a new beginning? Can we consider that the personnel which is there is capable of actually changing things, of bringing a new agenda, of charting a new course for the country, and for renewing the political culture of the DRC? And I think that is where we can say, if the answer is positive, it is possible to say it is a new beginning. Unfortunately, of course, the head of state is new. It has never been in politics, unlike his father, who's been there for at least 50 years, at least. The main opponent of President Mobutu was him, even though in 1991, I think he was part of the government. But it is well known that he has been a stout and very clear member and leader of the opposition of all the time he's been in politics. So when you look at the personnel today, you will find out that it is a personnel which is known by most people who are around and who have observed, be it Vital Kamerhe, who was the chief of the campaign, be it Martin Fayulu, who of course is also known, be it Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari, who was the flag bearer of the outgoing president. So in fact, it's not a new crew, for sure. And the question is, can they bring a new philosophy, a new political culture, a new direction to the country? I always say that it is not good to have prejudices. I don't think that somebody should be condemned without having been seen at work. I think that many people, in fact, approach the problem not through what they see or through what kind of indexes they have, but according to their own previous prejudices. So I think that one thing which is worrying, of course, is that the Prime Minister was only named on the 20th of May 2019, which is 6 months after the arrival to power. This is highly unusual. Now, will it mean that he's not master of his own, as the president is not master of his own decisions? We don't know. So what I would suggest is that we should give time to ourselves in order to bring in an appreciation. For now, appreciation is not based on observation. It is based on what we think will happen, what we think might happen, on the basis of the past, not on the basis of the present. And I think that if you take in Africa examples, there are many, many surprises. Take Egypt. Egypt with Anwar el-Sadat, when he came to power, I read so many things concerning him. But today he has left a trace in the Egyptian history, a deep trace. The agreements which he signed are still on today. And in fact, the one whom he changed, whose name is Gamal Abdel Nasser, has not left something which is worthy of staying in terms of international relations for the centuries to come. So what I'm saying is that we must stop as Africans to always use our prejudices to judge situations or people. Let's give the current situation time to show what can be done. And maybe then we'll be in a better position to judge whether the actors have gone one way or the other. So that is the first thing that I want to say. The second thing, which is not always looked into very well, is that today the DRC has started an economic embellishment. 3.8 was 2018 of GDP growth rate. Today, what is projected for 2019 is 4.1. And what is very interesting indeed is that the kind of products which the DRC has cannot be substituted. When you take the cell phones, when you take the batteries for cars, which is the new technology, which is being put in place now, the DRC cannot be avoided. It has to be taken on board. And today, the cobalt, for instance, half of the cobalt reserves of the world are there. So it means, therefore, that the bull years, the good years, can be used positively for the population. And I think the new mining code, which came into being on the 13th of June 2019, is really something which could help, provided that the leadership is strong enough to face the Canadian firms, the South African firms, the Chinese firms. There are about 4 or 5, which are the big ones there, and which are, of course, resisting the changes. When you have subventions to the state that go from 2% to 10%, I think it's very important. It's very important. And there are now special payments which are due for extra special profits as well, up to 50%. So I think that these could help if the personnel, the political personnel of DRC is really serious about working for the people. And I think that is where the problem may be. We have many speeches. We have many pronouncements. We have everybody says, I'm for the people, with the people, and of the people. But in fact, what has obtained for the last, I would say, 50 years or so, is that we've seen people who have cared much about their own pocket first. And this is not true only for DRC, unfortunately. It's true for many, many countries in Africa. And therefore, the situation we are facing today in the DRC is very much reminiscent in terms of the boom years of cobalt, of copper, and all that, which we witnessed in the 1972-73, when the Zionization process went on. So I think there is something to be done. There is something to be said. Okay, also, a question is asked. Is it possible when the president doesn't have the majority and then he's surrounded in parliament by the majority, can he work? I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the very first republic was exactly in that same configuration. Joseph Kosavubu did not have the majority politically. It was held by Patrice Emery Lumumba. So it's not the first time that it happens. But unfortunately, we've seen also that it's led to catastrophic results because the world was, I mean, the country was in total I would say, action, not in a positive manner. Okay, so we can say that we need to see whether, given the opportunity to act, we can then draw the conclusion of it's a new beginning or not. But I think that the context is historically unique. The context is historically appealing for good and serious politicians to do something. Now, if we go towards structural things, structural problems, we'll see that there can be no change as long as a few variables are not taken care of. The first variable I have in mind is, of course, the training of everybody, including the political personnel. There is no instance of an emerging country that has been emergent without having first changed its educational system. If you take China, they did it. Way back, the Japanese, during the Meiji era, 1868, they did that. They sent their best brains around the world to collect current knowledge and bring it back to Japan. When they got to Japan, what they did with that knowledge explains why 100 years later, Japan was classified the #3 world economy in the world. So they were able to contextualize it. So the problem today is, how long will it take for African countries to understand that an educational system must be a reflection of the type of citizenship you want to have, on the one hand, and all the type of material you put in it in order to, in fact, create the mentality which will pull people upward. When you look at the DRC, but also at most African countries, you will see that mostly it is a replica of what is done outside. We tend to repeat. We tend not to create, to innovate, to solve our problems locally, because that is what a system should do. Help you to solve your problems locally, not simply to imitate what is done elsewhere, and which corresponds to other realities and other wishes. So I think that we need a system where people are trained to actually be able to solve their daily problems, both theoretically and practically. And it means that we join in the digital revolution. When I see that most of our programs, like for instance in DRC, talk about hydraulic power. Hydraulic power still is, I think Inga 3 now, used to be 2, but Inga 3. It's about hydraulic power. To me, it is really a mystery. There is a sun shining on every African village, if I'm not mistaken. Why not use that technology to give people electricity. And everywhere you have wind power, which can be used. You have alternative means of energy that can be used everywhere. And especially a country like DRC is replete of such places and such areas. So why always cling to the old way of doing things? And I think that we can have a jump start by actually going into the digital revolution. We will not be able to train 1 million, 2 million engineers a year if we go through the normal school system. It's not possible. What we need today is to reach the same goals by going through the digital revolution. And I think that is the way we should approach things today. And if we do that with sincerity, I'm sure we can reach our goals. Now, concerning democracy. It is a very deep and I think a very important topic, especially in Africa. We must have the courage to draw the balance sheet of what we call democracy in an African context today. Has it caused more deaths or has it brought more political liberations and enthusiasm and good? I think it's a very important issue. When you look at what we call democracy, for most African political social scientists, most African political actors, including in the DRC, for them, it is a translation of what obtains here into their context. In other words, you must have an opposition on one hand, you must have a government on the other, and maybe the civil society or the NGOs. The question which needs to be answered today, does that approach and that configuration work? It is fundamental. If you take the DRC, for the last 20 or 25 years, around 10 million people have died. It's huge. It is unacceptable. That's only for one country. But if we add up all what I call the victim of a very outdated type of democratic concept, Africa is not the winner in this game, in my view. So we need to rethink what we mean by democracy. We cannot continue to behave as if Africa is a land which has never in its culture have democracy. It's not true. The type of democracy we have is called consensual democracy. And that is why, at the end of the day, you will end up with what is called government of national union. The last example being precisely in DRC, where the former opposition is getting together with the former government, and now they're seeing things together. The philosophy of democracy in Africa is not adversarial. It's not the type where, on the one hand, you have the government, and on the other, you have the opposition. The question which I always ask to anyone who listens to me, especially if they are from Africa, is to tell me in which village in Africa you can show me the head of the opposition, and in which village you will show me the head of the government, the ruling coalition. It doesn't exist. Does not mean that there's no opposition in Africa. Yes, there is. But the modality to have the rules changed, to have your views taken into consideration, are specific to our culture. And I would beg to submit that it is about time we go back to the drawing board. Look at the consensual ways which are the order of a day, and look at the different actors who must be in the political game, and just to have a PhD today or a master's is not enough in order to be on target to solve problems of the population. I think that we need a blend of our own culture and the blend with cultures from outside of Africa and engineer something which can last and can work. We cannot continue to go in our villages, talk about the treaties, and I say the Vladivostok Treaty or the, I don't know, the Vienna Treaty, or to people who, in fact, do not understand what you are talking about. And one of the reasons, in my view, why problems are recurrent is because they're not addressed from the root. They are addressed superficially. And we think that by giving a few dollars, we have solved the problem. In fact, we have not. And the very idea of democracy being universal, I think, should be contested. The idea that there's only one way of doing things, in parliament, in government, with the opposition on one hand, with the government on the other, I think has proven to be rather dangerous. Today, we need to sit down and manufacture an approach which will make sense to the ordinary African. So I think that's, to me, it's important. It's one of the lessons which I would like to see apply in the beginning of this new era in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I will end my talk by saying that, in fact, when we look at Africa today, the only problem which I see is that most Africans do not know much about themselves. They don't know much about themselves and therefore about the possibilities that are open to them. We tend to be thinking that the solutions to African problems will come from without Africa. But I think it's not possible. I think it is high time that we tell Africans that while not denying what the international community could bring eventually, the thrust of the developmental process must rest with us. And the other efforts are only additional, not central to what we are doing and to what we do. And I think that message should be made clear. Because otherwise, you have 500 million youth in Africa today. 500 million who are less than 20 years of age. They will determine whether Africa there will be a blessing or a curse for Africa. And I think the stakes of today are really with those youths. How well trained they are. How equipped they become to solve the problems of their environment, of their context, of their philosophy, of their values. And I think that if we continue to play that game, which is dangerous, to think that solutions will be brought from abroad, I don't know why and by whom, I think that we are preparing disaster on the continent. So we need, therefore, to review those things in good fraternity with the rest of the world, of course, but the driving seat of the developmental process should be owned and should be piloted by the Africans in general, but by the African youth in particular, which has a lot of genius, a lot of inventivity, a lot of innovation, but unfortunately is not given enough ear to do what they want and to produce a winning African combination. Thank you very much indeed for your kind attention. Thank you. Okay, I don't know whether you have some questions or maybe contributions, because when I teach here, I always insist on saying that the learning process is interactive. I don't believe that there's one person who can sit ex cathedra and then give the word and then the others just take and then go. I think that interaction is very important, and the experiences of each of those who are here, be they linked to Africa, be the link to another part of the world. I think what we mean by a global village is that. But the problem that I always have that notion of global village is which district of a global village you want to inhabit. That is really the problem with that. A village has many quarters. A city has many districts. It's not the same thing if you live in one or the other. So we must fight so that all the districts of the village have a decent lifestyle and a decent and human capacity building to be able for people to live I think, in a very honorable manner. Okay, so if you have questions or you have comments or you have observations, please feel free to make them and to share with us. Yes.
I want
Professor Rothward.
About the international context of politics. What are the pressures, and is there any great power competition over influence? United States, perhaps European Union. I have a second. When young people get educated, especially get educated in the West, do they come back and stay?
Well, the first one is the geopolitical aspect of the conflict in DRC. Yes, I think for the first time we saw the implication of many countries. What used to be the case was, of course, the East-West confrontation by what we call, as you know, the proxy wars. That is to say, the wars which are fought not by the people directly, but in the name of some superpowers. And I think that, of course, you had that in the first instance. And even a regime like that of President Mobutu was more or less aligned to the West and to the US. And Mr. Lumumba was accused of being aligned with the East, though there is absolutely no proof whatsoever to actually to credit that view. There's no view. He himself has always said no. He's an African nationalist. He's not working for somebody or some superpower. So in the 60s and 70s and part of the 80s, it was clear. But the new development is in Africa itself, where we have countries that have been involved in the DRC conflict, such as Rwanda, such as indirectly Uganda, such as South Africa even, such as there have been a few countries like that have come, and the United Nations, the African Union also has sent in troops there. So that is, I think, the new development. There were 8 such countries in Africa that were involved in the problems of the DRC. Were they able to solve them? I don't think so. I don't think so. And many were even accused of making sure that the conflict continues because, is it true or not, they were gaining benefit from their interaction in terms of smuggling some of the mines, the minerals which were abundant there. Now I'm saying that this needs to be proven, but these were allegations that were made. So I would say between East and West, yes, in the beginning, but then after that you had, even within the African continent itself, you had many countries that were involved in that particular fight, and I would say that war. Now the young, I think, you see when you are in an educational system that shows you that the grass is greener beyond the Mediterranean and so on, I think that often you end up with people who go and they don't feel like coming back. But my question is very simple, is that it's not the Martians who will come and do things, it's us. Now, there are people who cannot come back because they have, of course, threats on their lives. They are in danger. And then if they come back, probably they will they will suffer maybe brutalities and so on. That is clear, no problem. But I'm saying that there are many who can come back and try to build up something. You have many types of youth. You cannot categorize them as one category. I think there are those who go in order to acquire a knowledge, but in my view, such knowledge cannot be used like that. It has to be contextualized. Because I think that each culture, each part of the world has its own realities. And I think for a knowledge to be used in the best way possible, it is important to contextualize it. So you'll have more benefit from it. So not just apply it haphazardly without changing anything. Sometimes it may lead even to the reverse of what you are looking for. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Professor, for this. I've been working in the DRC and also today. The difficulties you mentioned. It also not limited to DRC, also for South Sudan. At the same time, every time I'm engaging sessions with European ambassadors or Western ambassadors, it's been overconfident on the parliamentary process. I was really curious to hear what reactions are you getting here in Vienna when you're received?
Okay. Well, I must say that I'm not talking to the United Nations officials in Vienna. So maybe the type of reaction I have is basically an academic style. And I think the students here are open to all kinds of analysis, which is the trademark, of course, of an international school. This kind of discourse is not always very well accepted, to be honest, because behind democracy or democratization, there's often an agenda, a hidden agenda. When you're democratizing it, on our camp, it's better than to democratize on the other camp in front. So you see, for instance, the demise of Muammar Gaddafi, for instance. Okay, everyone said, okay, he's a horrible person, he's the devil incarnate, and so on. My view is very different. It is true that in his relationships with America and with Europe, it was awful. He did terrible things, ordering the bombing of 2 B-47s, I think. Sorry, not B. Yeah, Boeing 747s. It's awful. No one in his right mind can support such a decision. It's terrible. It's true. But now, you take his relations with Africa. It's a different ballgame. He contributed. He had joint ventures. He gave a lot of his time and money. Now, the problem is to ask us to condemn him not on the ground of our relation, but on the ground of a despicable relations which they had. I think that is where the problem is. I'm saying that we cannot do that. Just as the reverse would have also been not acceptable. Every continent has to defend its best interest. It's normal. Now, it's one thing to say that man was not a saint, for sure. But we cannot say we must condemn him despite what he did for us. So that is why international relations, from an ethical standpoint, is very problematic. Very problematic. So democracy, to me, should be the uplifting of populations towards the realization of their common well-being. And it's just a tool. The important thing is to reach that goal. Now there is no set way. It's just like a mountain. If you go from here, you could reach there. If you go from here, you will reach there. But the idea there is one universal path is one that is, to me, problematic. It's problematic because of the consequences we've seen throughout the world. Okay, and now there are specific things which, for an African, are shocking. You take the massive arms of destruction, the massive destruction unit in Iraq, when the American General Colin Powell came to the United Nations Security Council. It was mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction, exactly. It was a pathetic episode. Pathetic, because precisely it rested on hypotheses which were false. So why all this in front of 193 countries saying that they had those weapons? They were certain that they had them. They will attack that country to destroy them. There was nothing. What lessons were drawn from that? What apologies did we receive from this pitiful theater? Nothing. So it leaves marks, to be very honest, on the sincerity and the credibility of an organization which is supposed to represent the entire world. There's a problem. There's a problem. There's only one, but there are many more like that. So I think that we need to be honest. We need to address the problems. The idea that one camp has all the answers and the others only has to take them lying down is not correct. I think that all of us can bring our own ideas, our own values, in order to make the world a better place, because it's in our interest. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, of course.
We did the election, the last election,
Mm-hmm. True, true. Even injunctions were given. Injunctions were given, which were not, I think, thankfully. Yes. Yeah. Even yes. Go ahead. You haven't finished.
The second one about the own democracy to manufacture their own democracy. We think in Africa today, DRC, by the way, I'm from DRC.
Mm-hmm.
The government, local government, are left the position deciding democracy, or they are also in production. They even telling you how you think.
Mm-hmm.
These are
There's two questions.
practical.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes, it's true that, especially concerning DRC, starting with the Congo Leopoldville, and then Zaire, and then today DRC, there's been a lot of competition. If you take even France and Belgium, it's clear that under Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, that's when the move was made towards the Zaire at the time. When he came in, I think it was 670, was it 74? I think, or 73, where he made a very clear move towards cooperation, increased cooperation with, and in fact, Belgium was thinking that it was not appropriate to do that because of historical reasons. But I think that that's when you started to see already a cleavage between Western countries. But it was clear at the last elections, of course. When you take even the Americans, you take the Europeans, and within Europe also you have different shades of positions. But I think especially the leadership we have today in America. One wonders really, one has many questions about what that leadership can bring. But what is certain is that the DRC has the type of products no one can do without, I think. And I think the positioning, which is ideological, is not so ideological. I think it is economic. It is economic. And what we see today, to me, is superficial, because there is an understanding that control should always remain in the Western camp, I think. About that, there's no real squabbling. Now, the question is, if the DRC authorities, public figures, and so on, start to create a coalition, because after all these minerals, they are your ancestral patrimony. It is your ancestral patrimony. But when you see the way people behave, it is as if they're just guarding them and that they don't belong to them. That's the impression that is given. So I think that there's a lot of mind reconstruction to make before people start assessing the role that should be theirs. Start behaving in a way that will draw the benefits, but then redistribute them to a majority of people. Because studies have shown that there's enough wealth in Africa for everybody. If you look at the amounts of money which are sent abroad, it's phenomenal. But what the law says, international law and criminal law says, the one who brings the looted funds or looted goods is equally guilty as the one who takes it. You who keep it in your bank, you who keep it in your country, when the sentence, the legal sentence falls, you will have exactly the same sanction. So that's why when we hear about corruption, corruption is very bad. No one should, and I think it's one of the main problems which we have. But it's like tango, you need two to tango. If the money is taken by a civil servant who earns next to nothing, but brings in $3–4 million, you don't need to be a police commissioner to know that that money comes from his savings. But when you take it, you become an accomplice. In the eyes of a law, you are equally, it's called coaction in crime. That's what it is. So I think it's important to tell our friends from the West and from other places that anytime that looted property or looted money is taken, you become an accomplice of those who brought it to you. And then perhaps the terms of the discussion will change. You talked about building democracy. Okay, I want just to maybe to illustrate that with an example of someone who did something. I have two examples. To me, we should not be talking about things that could happen somewhere in the stratosphere. They have already happened in Africa. I will give you an example which might surprise you. It's the example of a man called William de Klerk. William de Klerk was president of South Africa. Granted, the terms of his presidency and the modality were not exactly unanimous, to say the least. But he was the one who had under his command the police, the judiciary, the magistracy, the army. He was the commander-in-chief of South Africa. At the time, William de Klerk, had he reasoned like what we see around us in Africa, would have clung to power. What he did was he realized that if true democracy descends on South Africa, it means that the majority population will become those who will be at the driver's seat. So what he did was something that has never been done nowhere in the world. It's very important because it happened in Africa. He negotiated a process at the end of which he becomes vice president, not first, second vice president, and a prisoner named Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, who had moral prestige and consideration, but who was a prisoner in terms of his condition. He was a prisoner. The other one had all the powers, and he had none, practically. He negotiated, I said, a program, a process, at the end of which he turned out to become the second vice president and the prisoner in the name of democracy, in the name of majority rule, would be his boss, that is to say, the head of state. I suggest that to me, that is what I call a statesman. That is somebody who puts not his own life forward, but he says that for the sake of my country, if it commands that I do this, I will do it. And he did it. Today we may think that it is a small, no, it's not a small feat. It's a big thing which he did. That's one example. The second, of course, is Nelson Mandela himself. Why has Nelson Mandela succeeded as a president? That gentleman, between the age of 10 and 14, every day, attended the Xhosa traditional court, which was presided over by his uncle, who was the king. He writes all that. So he says that everything which I have applied in my life in terms of politics was drawn from my Xhosa cultural background. It's very important because people want to reinvent the wheel. No. And what are the premises, what are the core values of his political education? Because it's important that we know that. One, the ability to listen. Listen. Not just sit there, to listen. Second, the necessity to have everyone on board before you move to the next stage. There's no such thing as majority or minority. No. Consensual approach is the name of a game. Everyone, as much as possible, as far as possible, must be on the boat. That is the way we do our things. And that's the reason why he was able to take all the time. 4 times he was asked to get out of jail. 4 times he said, no, I will get there, if ever, on my own terms. And this is what he did. Because he believed in a few core values. What are our core values of our politicians whom we know? For which they are prepared to die. What are they? I wish to know. I'm sure there are some who have, but they are not the majority. So I'm saying that when you are in our villages, as you know, even if I'm sure you've been here maybe for long, I don't know, but in our villages, what makes a chief a chief? He never lies. Even if it is detrimental to his own personal interest, he doesn't lie. A chief does not steal. No. If you do those 2 things, you're no longer worthy of becoming a public figure. In our societies, traditional ones, these were the values which you found. But today, can we say that we are replicating that? Everyone can answer. All right. Yes, sir.
Professor Follier, please. Environment, Rwanda.
What is very interesting is that I was, as I said, a young fellow in Zaire. When Rwanda, to be honest, was not considered a big shot, to say the least. In the Great Lakes Commission, Rwanda, like Burundi, the one who was calling the shot was, of course, from Kinshasa. Today, we have an inversion of the reality, because it seems more true to say that the place of Rwanda is anything but marginal, to say the least. How is it possible? That's the question. And how was that transition and that inversion possible? I think it's a big lesson. I know that there are many people from the DRC who don't like to talk about Rwanda, but I think this is, to me, it's not a scientific approach. It's not a scientific approach. It's an epidemic approach. We don't need that. We need to look at things and see what are the factors that today explain the reversal of roles. Because today, Rwandan position has value. Simply because order has been put back to the country. And I don't know how many of you have been to Rwanda. It's an unbelievable place. The place, first of all, is very clean, which is, frankly, quite exceptional. People are disciplined. No, better. They are self-disciplined. When you go somewhere, don't try to jump the queue. You yourself cannot do that, because you see that it is not possible to do that. And if you throw a paper on the grass, everyone will look at you asking where this fellow comes from. That is how they have been able to reach a certain level of self-discipline. I believe personally more in self-discipline than in authoritarian discipline coming from somewhere else. But I think from a bad thing, which of course the genocide has been, today when you go to Rwanda, you see that they have capitalized on that in a positive manner. It's not a country where there are no problems. Of course there are problems. Show me a country on earth where there's no problem. But the quality of life, even of security today, and so all that has changed. And the educational system is among the best in Africa, which I think validates the hypothesis which I started to present here. They went through, they reshaped a few things, and they have an idea of a kind of citizen that must be produced by the type of school system they have. And this is what they are seeing today as fruits of their work. So to me, it is a small country, but I think Austria too is a small country, but it's a very rich country. Switzerland also is a small country, but these are also well-to-do countries. So I think that the size is no longer a criteria to do well and to succeed. And I think that they are showing the way of the future of what Africa can do. I mean, I'm telling you, when you get to Kigali, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Everything works, from the civil service to the motorbikes, and they have not the gilets jaunes, but the gilets jaunes is something else. But they have these vests, and they have the helmet. One for them, one for the passenger. If you try to do that in certain countries, it's riot. You'll get into terrible problems because people are resisting that. So I'm saying that there's also a lot of pedagogy. The head of a country moves everywhere. And this is reminiscent of what, because I wrote a book on Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara did not sleep one night somewhere. He was always checking whether things are going the right way and so on. And his wife, whom accepted to write the foreword of my book, tells me that even eating, he didn't eat. He was not interested in that. And he had one word, which I think is very interesting. I prefer to have water for all rather than champagne for a few. Drinkable water for all rather than champagne for a few. I think that illustrates the kind of mindset. And I think it's possible in Africa. So my answer is, it is a model on which we can reflect, especially when we take history. We take 30 years ago or 40 years ago, we see what Rwanda was and what it meant, and today what it is and what it means. But I'm saying that we must not also have an epidemic approach to this, because I'm aware of the fact that many people from DRC don't even want to discuss that. They say this and that. I don't think that is a proper way of approaching that subject. Okay. Sure, dear colleague.
What, in your opinion, is the most negative legacy of which holding development perhaps Democratic Republic of Congo?
Okay. This is a very, I would say, deep question, which can hold us here for maybe the next 1 hour, if we want really to go. First of all, I'm not exactly in agreement with many African academics, perhaps, or I think that Africa was not the only continent to be colonized, was not the only people to be enslaved. Does not mean that it is a good thing. Does not mean that the consequences were not traumatic. They were.
But only Africans, slave, source of slavery, racist.
Yeah, because we thought that after a generation, things will return to normal. Because in our type of slavery, I have many people in my villages who came in, but today are in the governing circles of a village, but they were not from there. They came to work in the camps and so on. It's true. But what I'm saying is that it's a mindset. It's a mindset. We as Africans must understand that, be it what do we call development? What do we call development? Development, to me, when you conduct a survey, because in my institute, we always have Africans from all parts of the continent. So we wrote a book called Rethinking Development from an African Perspective. And the first chapter of a book was the different definitions of development throughout Africa. What transpires from that is very interesting. Not a single definition given by those students from Ethiopia to Zaire at the time, to DRC today, to Senegal, to South Africa, not a single definition relates to a list of things which you must have before you are considered developed. Yes, I'm trying to bring. What they were saying is, the definition of development is the ability of a community to master its own conditions and life. It's also the ability of each individual within the community to live a decent and acceptable life through solidarity. That is a definition which transpires when you do a synthesis. It's very interesting. So it means that it is linked to, one, the notion of community. It is community-derived. It's not individual. Two, it has a link of people to get a common goal and a common being together through interaction and solidarity. What is the definition which we have? The macroeconomic definition. the number of tarred roads, the number of hospitals, the number of television and radio, so it is quantitative. So on the one hand, you have a qualitative definition, because they want even to offer us to say that milk, in pastoral societies, they said everyone must have milk, butter, yogurt, and so on. That is, for them, a developed society. Very interesting. On the one hand, on the other hand, you have a quantitative approach. GDP per capita, Human Development Index, and so on and so forth. The problem with that is that when you take the World Bank approach, they say, is very poor he who lives on $1 a day, and is considered poor, he or she, of course, who lives on $2 a day. That's a poor. Very poor, $1. The problem is that in most rural areas, people have not $1, nothing. They stay on months on end just doing barter. I have chicken, you have plantains, or you have cassava. Okay, we exchange. You have rice, I have beans, that's the way many people live in Africa. They have no access to money. So how do you count them in World Bank statistics? Are they zombies? Are they what? So I think we must be very careful, because if you use this kind of methodology, you apply it to the wrong society with the wrong, not with the wrong society with different ways of lives and values, you will end up with statistics which are flawed. So I did this long development to say that we use the same term. We may not talk about the same thing, which is problematic. That's why I prefer to talk about progress, change towards the better. That's what I see as being more consensual. Now, we cannot reinvent the world. We cannot say, when I came here, I was in an airplane. I was not driving. I was not on a horseback. So there are things which, of course, we can combine. But I think that the spirit of a society, the values, we should not put them aside. We should reinforce them, like medicine, things like that. 70% of people who are sick in African countries go to the traditional medical doctor. What does that mean for public medicine, public health? You cannot achieve public health by only building hospitals. The majority of people will not go there. In my country, in Cameroon, today, we have a dual judicial system. We have the traditional system, and we have the modern, known as that, system. In a city called Fumban, which is the headquarters of a department, 75% of people who are seeking justice go to the Sultan, who delivers traditional justice, and do not go to the judge, the prosecutor, and the magistrate, and so on. What does that mean? It means that the type of verdict which is delivered, they understand. The other one which calls article this, paragraph that, and that, they don't understand that. It's not so much something they are keen to go to. So it means that can we reach development by sidelining those very important aspects which are really addressing the core of who we are? That's my question. And I think that we cannot. And I think that we need to take that into consideration. If we do that, we blend the two systems, we take elements which reinforce each other in the direction of finding the best solution for the individual in the context where he is, then we'll reach, I think, development in terms of progress. That's what I would say. Okay. Yes?
Maybe one more question. So I think the political process of the past few years in the DRC has shown that there is actually a vivid democratic tradition in the DRC. You see that Joseph Kabila did not manage to attend the presidential term.
Very true.
President Nkurunziza, President Kagame, they did manage. You see that they are using terms where you have Mr. Fayou as le président élu and President Tshisekedi as le président négocié. So with the radio trottoir, etc., there is a vivid tradition, but nevertheless, there are also quite a lot of problems, I think, to get a step further in the democratization process, whichever form it will take. In the east of Congo, in other parts, there are still armed struggles, Ebola crisis today, but let's hope that will be managed in the near future. And the lack of data even, so even if you want to form the education in the whole country, it will be very, very difficult. So what would, in your opinion, what would be the let's say, the very, very first step to strengthen the democratization process?
Well, I don't think that one has the magical stick to change that, but I think you said many things concerning, for instance, the arms situation and so on. You see, frankly, I think when you take the arms industry, you have only two countries that manufacture arms. You have South Africa and you have Egypt at the industrial level. So most of the arms which are there are not coming from these two countries. They come from all over the world. And the democratization system after the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989 also materialized in the democratization of acquisition of arms, I'm afraid. With $14 or $15, you could acquire arms. And we created those things called, this category of people called children, is it soldiers? Child soldiers. You cannot have a child soldier. It doesn't mean anything, because a child cannot be a soldier, and a soldier is someone who's trained, and by definition cannot be a child. So I think these are things we have accepted very quickly. Now, concerning democracy, I think it's not easy. If I'm sitting here today, I'm saying that it can be done tomorrow, it's an illusion. No. First of all, it's consensual. My view of democracy is consensus. The idea that a group of people have a solution to other people's problems is, to me, not true. The people who are concerned are the ones who actually have the solution to the problems. Why don't we ask them? Yes, if you go to the peasant class, peasant society, they've been doing that for ages. They know what is workable, what is not. Maybe we can bring additional things, maybe. But the core, they know. But today we have a very interesting thing which is called sustainable development. But my question is, can we really bring lessons of sustainable development in Africa and remain serious? I doubt it. Because the whole way of life of the African peasant is based on respect of nature, for nature. He prefers to die rather than to destroy nature for his children. So I think when all these things are good, but I don't have a magic solution, but I think that we must, those who are paid to think like us, we must exhibit more humility. We must exhibit more humility because we call people who speak neither French, English, German, or Japanese, I'm sorry, or Spanish and so on, we call them illiterate. No, they're not illiterate. They don't speak European languages, but they're not illiterate. You have wise people in their culture who are full of experience and knowledge. The fact that they don't speak one of the European language or Northern Hemisphere language cannot categorize them as illiterate. No. So, but these are things that we do in Africa ourselves, with our own people. We say, okay, when you go to a village, oh, you know these people, they're illiterate. No. So the statistics which we put there, rate of illiteracy, is wrong. It means simply the rate of people who don't speak the official language adopted by the country. That's what it means. But it doesn't mean that they are literate. So you see, if we pay attention to these things, we may change the way we perceive ourselves. Because we need to pay respect to a whole category of people who can have the key to our solutions. But we throw them away and we say, since they have not gone to school like us, since they don't hold PhDs or master's degree or whatever, therefore they are uneducated. No, certainly not. They are educated in their own culture and civilization. And they can teach you, me, tons of things which we don't know. So I think that humility of those of us who are paid to think is a good starting point. And I think I can only talk of that because that's what I know, rather than maybe to ask for the politicians to change. I don't know that political world so well, but I know that if we have a different approach to knowledge, different respect for what is called ancestral traditional knowledge, maybe we can reach quicker our goals than before. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we're already at 8 o'clock. Since it's been streamlined, I think that they will probably soon stop. So I would like to thank you very much for your time, your patience, and especially your comments and your observations. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.